Can you imagine any worse way of dying than by a conscious acid?
Cryptids, mythic of fantasy and sci-fi. We are everything monster.
Where does the Blob come from, and what inspired this red, seemingly uninspired oddity of just a hint of Lovecraft in it? The Blob itself is an amorphous collection of conscious goo that devours organisms by rapid absorption. We'll explore how a phenomena like this could possibly exist in a future episode, but first we must consider where this thing originated from. Before we get too deep in the sticky sentient ooze, I'd like to thank my patrons for their support, for if you're happy to see this video up, know that it is them who made the final decision to make it so. The Blob monster was first introduced in 1958's independent production, The Blob. Prior to, but closer to the remake, exactly 30 years later under the same title, a much lesser known sequel to the original Beware the Blob was released in 1972. All three produced by Jack H. Harris, a small-time producer not really known for much other than maybe for a select few of you dino fans, Dinosaurus of 1960. What inspired Philly-born and raised Jack Harris to come up with such an odd yet simple idea at a horror? A horror that has situated the Blob movies into a certain historical hall of fame, for the probable inspiration itself is likely to raise more eyebrows than anything in these entertaining flicks. Jack was ambitious in creating not just a monster movie, but a good one and in full color. Irvine Milgate, a friend of his, pitched him an idea of a mysterious space jelly crashing down to Earth near Philadelphia, a story that was featured in newspapers only several years prior. On September 27, 1950, a Philadelphia Inquirer report read that two veteran police officers spotted and followed a strange object descending from the sky to the corner of 26th Street. What they discovered, they described as a gelatinous purple mass with a crystalline-like interior that emitted some sort of odorless mist. It was 6 feet in diameter and they believed it to be alive as it approached a telephone pole. Backup was called and 2 more officers arrived to witness this phenomenon. John Collins, one of the first of the 4 to find the mass, decided to touch the substance. The jelly did not burn or eat at him, but rather quickly evaporated, as did the entirety of the glob within the next 30 minutes. The officers did seem to believe that this thing came from outer space. Now this was unexpected. This is not a cryptozoological episode, but it appears that this isn't the only account of a goo dropping from the skies. With just a little bit of research, you will find accounts dating back to the 19th century, and with a bit more digging, find reports as early as the 13th century. This wonder-coined star jelly continues to be reported as usually being discovered on the ground, but also as in 1994, along with rain. Sometimes it is colored, predominantly purple, but often clear and colorless. Theories and some tested evidence range from star particles to animal byproducts to algae to mold to airplane droppings to atmospheric reactions. One explanation suggesting that this is the vomit of a frog or toad-eating creature, this possibly being an indigestible or poisonous portion of the animal's chemistry. This still doesn't help much to explain what happened on that night of 1950 when such a large mass was encountered, nor do we know what influences were pressed upon these officers or what deeper intentions they may have had. All in all, Jack Harris never admitted nor denied this inspiration to the film, and so the story only enriches the franchise that much more. Nevertheless, there's an interesting variety to this phenomenon, and come to think of it, I think I've even seen some clear gelatinous stuff out there in the woods. Anyway, a topic for another time. Jack Harris went with the Blob from outer space idea and actress of many movies during the 1930s and 40s. Kay Lineker wrote the script along with Theodore Simonson. Before becoming the Blob, the title went through some alterations, from the Molten Meteor, which Kay advised against, to the Glob, which almost made the spotlight if it weren't for the fact that it was already associated with children's literature by Walt Kelly. As for a director, Irvin Uworth stepped in, he who would go on to work with Jack Harris also as producer in 40 Man and Dinosaurus. With Irvin's total directed movies of 6, The Blob being the most notable, 40 Man would most likely be the runner-up. Poor Steve McQueen, if only he'd known, he could have been a millionaire. Remember kids, always take a percentage over quick cash. Residual income is the way to go. It's hard to know whether the original movie's funding was closer to $100,000 or double that, but upon release it flopped. But it didn't stay low for long as it grossed out at $4 million and ultimately made over $40 million. The short of the Blob is this: a shapeless red jelly entity landing on Earth that feeds on people by absorbing them and growing rapidly thereafter. As its size and mobility increase, it wreaks more havoc in a small town near to where it first dropped at. It is combated with acid, fire, bullets, and electricity, but nothing seems to slow it down, except for cold. Overall, this general premise remains the same in the 1988 remake, although there are significant changes to the origins and defeat of the beast, if we could call it a beast. In 1958's original, the monster crashes down within a meteor in the whereabouts of Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Due to the more violent scenes being cut, there isn't much blood or gore within this version, although the Blob does appear clear at first and grows redder and redder in the film the more the monster kills and devours. The logic for showcasing the victim's culmination here was conceived by adding more and more red dye to the Blob's silicone prop as the plot progressed. The goo is found in a spherical cratered meteor that cracks open, and with that, there exists no more scientific analysis of it, which left it a bit open to interpretation, and that's where 1988's remake took advantage and delved in deeper. As in the originals, the Blob initially clashes with the Earth and is discovered by an elderly man. The meteor appears larger and more realistic with a veiny ooze within. Later in the movie, the supposed meteorite object is revealed to be a technological capsule, and the captive, an experimental virus capable of surviving the conditions of outer space. Now it is up to the die-hard viewer to consider which is the truer canon, but being as the original didn't explore the initial crash in detail, this sort of continuation did a fine job at adding some depth to the story. Side note, in the 1972 sequel to the original, a technician returns home after weeks of working on some piping in the Arctic with a sample of the goo that he fails to keep frozen, and thus rolls out another horror, albeit this one being much goofier and just weird at times. If you can bear through the first hour of it, it does get better, but don't say I didn't warn you. With that, it is available for free on YouTube here somewhere. The other significant difference between the original and its remake is the ending. In the original, the Blob is frozen with numerous fire extinguishers and transported to the Arctic, where it would remain in this immobile state. In the remake, the Blob is hit with artificial snow, fire extinguishers, and very questionably blown up, leaving the ground covered with its frozen crystals. All three of the installments hinted of a continuation prior to the credits, but I'll just leave those spoilers out for you to search out. It's very likely we'll be seeing the Blob again on the big screen or some screen, but I wonder what other details of the lore will be conceived and revealed. What at a molecular level is it composed of? If, or should I say when, a new sequel or remake gets released, I would like to see this monstrous concept explored on a larger scale involving the whole country or various nations. As I would argue, it's always time for a good pandemic movie, whether it's because of their grand and fascinating nature, or because they keep us on our toes, thoughtful of the dire possibilities that might arise. It is a challenge I bestow upon myself to up the quality of every video I make while trying to release as many as possible without missing any crucial monster detail. And these monsterites greatly help me with this and my journey to become independent off the whole YouTube headache. Toby, Cloud, Dante, Tammy, Christian, Rain, Ramin, Joseph, and to the rest of my patrons, thank you. Whether one sees the symbolism behind the Blob as a lesson for teenagers on higher responsibility or the representative red of communism, the Blob is a powerful force, and it was an honor introducing it on the channel. If you would like me to make a future episode or episodes where I explore the science behind it as well as its official World of Monsters power level, please let me know below. Until I see you in our next video, stay monstrous. And consider getting yourself an iron-on patch of Cyclops Scully here over at Patreon. I have been, and still am, Monster Master Arthur. The Blob versus Marvel's The Blob. What say you?